Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of the devil's footprints of Devon, 100 miles of cloven prints in snow, in one night, in 1855. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. On the morning of February 9, 1855, the residents of Devon in southwest England woke to find their county blanketed in 4 inches of fresh snow. And in the snow, stretching in a single line of hoofprint-shaped tracks from the estuary in the north to Totnes in the south, were the footprints of something that had walked 100 miles in a single night. The prints were 4 inches long and 3 inches wide, roughly shaped like a cloven hoof or shoe, and spaced exactly 8 inches apart, too regularly spaced for a natural animal's gait. They proceeded in a perfectly straight line, regardless of obstacles. When the line reached a haystack, it went over the haystack. When it reached a 14-foot stone wall, it went over the wall. When it reached a river, it continued on the other side. When it reached a house, the prints appeared in the garden on the far side, as if the creature had passed through the building. The prints went through drainpipes too narrow for any known animal. News of the footprints spread rapidly across Devon. A letter to the Illustrated London News, published on February 16, 1855, signed G.M.M, provided the first detailed account and described how the tracks resembled in some respects a donkey's shoe, but were not like that of any known animal. Additional letters from Exeter, Dawlish, Lympstone, and other towns confirmed that the same prints had appeared across a wide area, seemingly made in a single night by a single entity moving at extraordinary speed in a perfectly straight line, regardless of terrain. Local clergymen preached sermons about the devil's return. Parties of frightened residents refused to follow the tracks. Hunting dogs, brought to follow the scent, reportedly refused to approach the prints and cowered. The event has never been explained. Every natural explanation proposed, a kangaroo, a badger, a large bird, a hopping mouse, an experimental military device, fails to account for the complete picture. A single continuous trail of 100 miles, in a perfectly straight line, over every obstacle, in a single night, in a print pattern that matches no known British animal. The original newspaper accounts from 1855 are unambiguous. The witnesses, including a vicar, a justice of the peace, and multiple educated correspondents, were credible, and the tracks were seen by hundreds of people before the snow melted. Whatever walked through Devon on the night of February 8-9, 1855, it has not walked again, or if it has, it left no prints anyone was looking for. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Governments keep secrets. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is documented fact, confirmed by declassified archives, freedom of information disclosures, and the confessions of officials long after the events in question. The United States government ran secret programs to test psychedelic drugs on unwitting civilians, M-Cultra, to spy on its own citizens, COINTELPRO, and to cover up nuclear testing incidents that killed American soldiers. The British government suppressed information about UFO encounters by military personnel for decades. The Soviet Union systematically falsified scientific data to maintain ideological conformity. None of this means that every government secret involves supernatural phenomena or alien contact. The reality of classified programs is almost always more mundane. Military technology being tested covertly, intelligence operations that cannot be publicly acknowledged, or simply the bureaucratic instinct to classify first and justify later. Most UFO sightings that turn out to have official explanations were classified aircraft. Most government denials of anomalous phenomena are straightforwardly honest. The phenomena being denied are simply not real. But the documented history of government secrecy has a practical effect on investigative credibility. When officials deny knowledge of events that witnesses describe in compelling detail, that denial cannot be taken at face value without independent corroboration. The proven track record of institutional concealment means that institutional denial, however authoritative it sounds, is not the same as evidence of absence. This complicates every modern mystery that touches on official narrative. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the devil's footprints of Devon, 100 miles of cloven prints in snow, in one night, in 1855, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The primary documentation of the Devon Devil's footprints consists of letters published in the Illustrated London News between February 16 and March 3, 1855, supplemented by accounts in the Times of London and several regional newspapers. The letters describe footprints appearing across a broad swath of Devon, including the villages of Topsham, Limpstone, Exmouth, Teignmouth, and Dawlish, a distance from north to south of roughly 100 miles along the estuary and South Devon coast. The accounts consistently describe prints of approximately 4 inches by 3 inches in horseshoe or cloven hoof shape, with an 8-inch stride, appearing in a single continuous line, rather than the double-track pattern produced by a 4-legged animal's resembled gait. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly, it is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the print's behavior at obstacles is the most anomalous feature documented in the contemporary accounts. Multiple independent correspondents reported that the tracks went over haystacks, crossed frozen river surfaces, passed through drainage pipes with openings of 4 inches diameter, continued through walled gardens apparently by passing over walls of 12-14 feet, and in several cases appeared on both sides of walls without any mark at the base of the wall, suggesting a landing or takeoff point. One account describes the prints entering a snow-covered greenhouse through a narrow vent and appearing on the other side of the glass. These features are impossible to reconcile with any normal animal's movement. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable we should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The Reverend Henry Fortescue Light of Brixham, one of the correspondents, was particularly credible witness. He was a scholar of some note, the author of the hymn Abide With Me, and not given to sensationalism. His account describes the prints as appearing with the regularity of a military stamp, and notes that they caused genuine fear in the local population, with many residents refusing to leave their homes after dark in the days following the discovery. The hunting dogs brought by local gentry to follow the tracks reportedly refused to follow them and showed signs of extreme distress when brought near the prints, though this element of the account appears in only some versions. This is where the unconventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the most significant physical detail noted in contemporary accounts is that the prints appeared to have been made by a two-legged creature walking in a single-file line, unlike any four-legged British animal whose prints would appear in a paired pattern. The stride of 8 inches was also noted as too short for most large animals and too long for most small ones. The depth of the prints in the snow was consistent, suggesting a weight-bearing impact rather than the varying depth pattern produced by an animal leaping from footprint to footprint. These features, taken together, describe something bipedal, consistent in weight, moving in an extremely straight line at a pace that covered 100 miles in approximately 8 hours of darkness. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of several subsequent researchers have attempted to reinvestigate the case using the historical documentation. Mike Dash, a paranormal historian, conducted the most thorough modern analysis in a 1994 article and concluded that while the reports are genuine and the witnesses credible, the documented extent of the tracks may have been exaggerated through the conflation of multiple separate sets of prints made by different animals in different locations. Under Dash's analysis, no single trail covered 100 miles, but rather multiple shorter trails made by different animals were interpreted as a single trail by witnesses and reporters who communicated accounts to each other and unconsciously stitched them together. This theory is plausible, but does not explain the anomalous behaviors reported at obstacles. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the Devon footprint event of 1855 is not unique. Similar incidents have been documented in other locations and at other times. In 1840, mysterious tracks appeared in the Scottish Highlands following a snowfall and were described in terms almost identical to the Devon accounts. In 1945, a similar report came from Devon itself. In 2009, a retired postman named Jill Wade photographed prints in the Devon snow that she described as matching the 1855 accounts, and the story briefly received national media coverage before experts identified the prints as likely made by a badger whose footprints had melted and merged in a distinctive pattern. This 2009 identification, the melted badger print explanation, was subsequently retroactively applied to the 1855 event by some skeptics, though it fails to explain the straight lines over haystacks. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, The alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the devil's footprints of Devon, 100 miles of cloven prints in snow in one night. In 1855, this is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the natural animal theory encompasses several candidates: a badger, a kangaroo, possibly escaped from a private collection, a large bird such as a bustard, or a series of different animals whose tracks were conflated. The most sophisticated version of this theory, proposed by Jeffrey Household in 1950 and independently by cryptozoologist Mike Dash, identifies the Limpstone and Dawlish tracks as potentially made by an experimental balloon lost from the Royal Navy base at Devonport, whose trailing anchor rope hopped along the snow surface, making regular impressions. While elegant, this theory requires an extraordinary coincidence of multiple separate unusual events being reported simultaneously, and it does not account for the penetration of enclosed spaces. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the supernatural theory, taken seriously in 1855 and kept alive by subsequent writers, holds that the prints were literally made by a supernatural entity, the devil or a demonic visitor, performing an inspection tour. O.F. Devon. This interpretation was promoted from pulpits in the days following the discovery and has been maintained in popular culture ever since. As a scientific proposition, it has no evidential support, but it accurately reflects the interpretive framework that most contemporaries applied to the event and explains the geographic scope and obstacle crossing behavior without requiring the special pleading that natural explanations require. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the mass perception theory, developed from Mike Dash's research, proposes that the 1855 event was a genuine social phenomenon, multiple separate sets of animal tracks made by different creatures in different locations, which frightened and excited local people, and were then reported to newspapers in an increasingly sensationalized form. Early letters were followed by later ones that expanded the geographical range, added details about obstacle crossing, and contributed to a growing collective narrative that exceeded the actual evidential base. Under this model, something genuinely anomalous was observed, perhaps unusual tracks made by a specific animal in specific conditions. But the 100-mile obstacle crossing version of the story is a legend that grew in the retelling. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree that is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question, is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the devil's footprints of Devon, 100 miles of cloven prints in snow, in one night, in 1855, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes: the primary evidence consists of the contemporary newspaper letters from 1855, which are verifiable historical documents. The letter writers can be cross-referenced against historical records. Several are identifiable as real people of the described professions and addresses, lending credibility to the basic claim that unusual footprints were found in the snow in multiple Devon locations. The letters describe physical details consistently: print size, stride length, single file pattern, in ways that would be unlikely if the correspondents were simply inventing stories. Consistency of physical description across multiple independent correspondents writing from different locations is the strongest evidential point. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the absence of any 1855-era debunking is significant. Victorian England was not credulous. The period's scientific culture was robust, and unusual claims in major newspapers typically attracted immediate skeptical responses. The Illustrated London newsletters on the Devon footprints generated follow-up correspondence, but no contemporary correspondent successfully identified a natural cause. Richard Owen, the greatest British naturalist of the 19th century, was reportedly consulted and was unable to identify the printmaker, though this is known only from secondary sources. The failure of 19th century natural history to produce an explanation, despite the event occurring in an era of intense naturalistic inquiry, is a weak but genuine evidential point. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed the 2009 Devon photographs, while ultimately explained as badger tracks melted into a distinctive pattern, provide an important analogical datum. The photos show that badger tracks in melting snow can produce a single-line impression that superficially resembles a cloven hoofprint, with a stride pattern and print size not obviously identifiable as a badger. If this mechanism was operating in 1855, it would explain the initial observations, but it does not explain the straight lines, the obstacle crossings, or the remarkable consistency reported across multiple towns. The 2009 case demonstrates both that natural explanations for footprint anomalies exist and that they struggle to account for the full range of the 1855 reports. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Devil's Footprints of Devon, 100 miles of cloven prints in snow, in one night, in 1855. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Devil's Footprints remain one of the most thoroughly documented and least satisfactorily explained anomalous events of the Victorian era. They are regularly referenced in surveys of unexplained phenomena and have generated a substantial secondary literature ranging from Charles Fort's 1919 treatment in the Book of the Damned to Mike Dash's careful 1994 historical analysis in Fortean Studies. The event's documentation is better than most comparable cases because it occurred at a time when the popular press was actively covering unusual natural phenomena and when literate correspondents had access to national publications. Modern interest in the case has been renewed by the 2009 Devon incident and by the application of digital historical research tools to the original newspaper archive. Researchers using the British Newspaper Archive have located additional 1,855 accounts not included in previous surveys, though these new accounts largely confirm rather than expand the existing picture. The fundamental mystery remains intact. The primary witnesses were credible, the physical descriptions are consistent, the geographical spread is vast, and no natural explanation has successfully accounted for all the reported features. Whatever made the Devon footprints in February 1855 has not yet been convincingly identified, and the event sits in the same category as the best of Victorian mysteries, genuinely inexplicable with available evidence, stubbornly resistant to dismissal. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Devil's Footprints of Devon, 100 miles of cloven prints in snow, in one night, in 1855, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Devil's Footprints ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle, it is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.